Hi, everybody. We're back again with another episode of Women of Substance. And I have with me here today, Eva Helen. Nice to have you here, Eva.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something very pertinent. Did you know that women account for almost 47.7% of the global workforce as of 2020, actually? And of course, this number has drastically gone down since then, but 50.2% of college-educated workforce are women, and only 27% of them are managers or leaders, and that is a very shocking statistic. For the past 20 years, the women in software engineering have increased by just 2%. 48% of women still occupy entry-level roles. 69.8% of women say they prefer having a job, a paid job, rather than staying at home. And 66.5% of men agree with them. So many men in tech want to support women's advancement and help to improve quality in the workplace. They just don't know where to start and what they can do. And Eva has actually written a book telling them exactly how to start and what to do. She's a founder and CEO of EQ Inspiration, and she's been engaging men in conversation of gender equality and women's advancement for many years. And Eva, you and I met because of the fact that both of us were working together for the same cause. You were looking at gender parity, and at that point in time, I was running a nonprofit for bringing more women in STEM. She's a successful author of Women in Tech, a book for guys. And guys, this book is available for sale online, and you can really look it up. It's called Women in Tech, a book for guys. She's also on Vasion's board of directors. She's a successful entrepreneur. In 2000, she co-founded and ran Sandbolic, an enterprise software company acquired by Citrix in 2015. And prior to that, Eva co-founded Number One GM, which was acquired by Autodesk in 1999. Eva was born in Sweden, holds an MBA from University of Stockholm, and she relocated to our own Silicon Valley in the mid-90s. She's a speaker, she's a coach, she's a mentor to men, and she's a mentor to women in tech. And she is going to talk to us today about why men are so important for women's inclusion. Eva?
Thank you so much. That is a big introduction. It's interesting, when you hear the whole history and everything of sort of why you've landed where you've landed. And so for those who don't know me at all, I just want to fill you in. And this is actually something that I do share in the book, because the initial chapter of the book is my background and my story, because I feel like if I'm asking men in particular now to open up and to get more comfortable talking about themselves and their own backgrounds and why they think the way they think, then I need to share some of my background as well. And when I was in my early 20s, I was up on the barricades fighting for women's rights. And I thought that that was going to be my passion. That's what I was going to be doing. And I wanted to do something because already back then, the statistics didn't look that different from what it does today. And I thought, well, there must be something I can do. But then I kind of realized I had no work experience. So it was difficult for me to go out and speak about women in the workplace. So I kind of forgot about all of that and went into tech instead. But after working for 20 years in tech, I actually do have a lot of real life experience and a lot of positive experience working both with men and women. And I wanted to make a positive spin on all the discussions that we are having on gender inequality in the workplace. Because as you recall, when you and I met, it was fairly soon after the Me Too movement had its kind of...
It was just starting.
It was being brought back, right? And everybody was talking Me Too. And so I was talking a lot about the fear factor. And I was looking at, a lot of us were concerned. What is this going to do to those men who are good guys? Which in my opinion, most of them are. And there are those, there's some bad ones here and there. And the whole sort of male race took the blame for that.
Yes,
So
and I remember having a conversation with you. I think it was around 2018 that we met. And I remember having a conversation with you about, all my mentors are men, literally.
yes.
I did not at that point in time have a single female mentor. I had a mentor, a man mentor that was so invested in me in terms of how I was developing my career. The other one was interested in how much I was reading, how much I was embodying what I was reading back into my business principles. So I remember you and I had a conversation around where is this going to leave us? And is this the answer?
Yeah. And I think that there's a combination, right? We do
Mhm.
need those mentors, the ones that are willing to step up and really both kind of listen to what women's concerns are, and the ones that are willing to sponsor women and lift them forward and make them visible. Absolutely. And I think that the sort of the backlash of that whole discussion that we had 4 years ago was both, it was the increased fear among the men, it was the increased burden on the women to take over all of that support of each other. So are women supposed to do it all, both try to carry their own careers forward, but also support all the other women? And we all have to support each other. But now what I'm trying to do is to put a little bit of that responsibility back on the men, but making them comfortable enough so that they will step forward and support, promote, hire the women around them.
Yes, and so men are important for women's inclusion. I remember also when we hosted the Women in Tech Summit in San Francisco. This was, I guess, 2017, and we had around 100 speakers over 3 days, and half of them were men. And people would ask the foundation why they were having men speakers at a women conference, and the
Yes, I
answer
know.
was still the same, that it is the ecosystem, it is the tech ecosystem. If we want men to understand the perspective of women and give them respect, you have to involve them in that perspective first. You have to give them enough respect so that they come forward and start understanding how women in tech are feeling, but not only feeling, but professionally take the onus of developing them. So you've interviewed 60 men for your book. How did you pick these men, and tell us about the most common issues that most of these men said they had?
Yeah, no, it's the interview process was the most fascinating part of this whole thing. Like, I'd been part of running tech companies for 20 years. So my life was like year after year was the same, the same, the same. I was obviously selling product, very difficult. And I wasn't part of building product. So I didn't get a lot of outlet for my own creativity, shall we say. And so when I started thinking about, I'd gone to all these women's events and I'd met tons and tons of women, and everybody was super supportive of each other. And I still felt, is it really fair that the women need to do so much? How can we get the men involved in this conversation? And why aren't they part of these events that I was going to? With the exception of your event in 2017, right? They weren't there. And so I started interviewing men, and I did a very, very broad outreach, and I got, tons of yeses. Sure. I asked for an hour of their time, and I said that I was doing interviews to try to understand better where men's thinking was around gender equality in the workplace, and how willing they felt that they were, and if they weren't willing to support women and minorities, where did that come from? And then what actions were they actually taking? And I did the interviews, and it was the most fascinating thing I've ever done. I absolutely loved it. I felt so grounded, and it was just really interesting conversations. And I kid you not, these men were talking as much as I'm doing right now. They were, it was a question of getting them into, like, okay, how did you grow up, and what have you experienced, and where did these thoughts that you have now, where do they come from? Was your mother working? Do you have daughters? All of these different things. So after I had done almost 60 interviews. I was still not entirely clear what I was going to do with all the material. And so I let it, I processed it a lot over and over and over. And I would go for long walks and I would re-listen to the interviews and I would reread them and I would listen again and so on. And then patterns started to emerge. And I was able to identify 7 character prototypes of men. So 7 distinct types of, well, it's not, it's character that had different characteristics and there were similarities. And then I thought, oh yes, that's what I need to do. I need to put them into a matrix and I need to meet men where they are, because obviously the man who is at the bottom, so to speak, of the matrix is not going to be receptive to the same message and the same conversation as the man who is an expert at this or works in HR. And so that is how the idea was born. And being able to use, both all of these years, just like you, working with men for years and years and years, I walked into it with I think there was a certain amount of understanding. Like I had some ideas of what I thought I was going to get out of it. But it was really, I was trying to keep my eyes wide open during the time of the interviews. And then I was able to use my creativity to come up with the matrix.
So, there was another very interesting statistic that the Bureau of Labor Statistics just came out with, and they say that out of 74.6 million women in the workforce globally, 4 out of 10 work in sectors dominated by women. But the problem with that is that between now and 2030, between 40 to 160 million women will need to convert to high-skilled jobs, or as they have overpopulated industries that will get automated or just will go away. Yeah. So this again just tells you the importance of reskilling women, and you really can't take women and reskill them in a bubble. Right. So what do you need from the entire ecosystem to reskill women is a lot of the institutional support from ecosystem, which comprises of mostly men, especially when we're talking about high skill jobs like tech, which is totally men dominated. We're not saying that women are not there. Women are there, but they're not doing the challenging upper level jobs. All of them are not able to reach there. So I know in your book, you talk about 7 different levels of awareness and actions that that men are taking, and represented by 7 male character prototypes. What is the methodology? What is a solution to this?
Well, so the first thing to consider is that everybody's motivated by different things. And so on the matrix, the person who is further down will be motivated by something completely different than the person at the very top. And so if we talk about like the talent shortage, which is really what you're addressing with this, right? There's going to be elimination of jobs that women are already doing. And then in tech, we have this enormous talent shortage. I mean, we're talking like millions of people short. And so we do need to move into the phase, just like you're saying, of re-educating, in this particular case, women. But anybody who has the sort of the lower paying jobs or jobs that you can leave at 5 o'clock and then you close the door and then you're able to go home and you don't have to worry about your job until the next morning. And the re-education there's something that every person can contribute with to start the re-education of women, but it's going to be very different. So if we let's talk through the matrix just a little bit so that the people who are listening get a better idea of what we're talking about. So think about a ladder or a staircase with 7 different levels. At the very top, I've named these people just to make it easier for us. So when we're in conversations, both between you and me now, or when you go back into your office, or anybody who's listening, you can actually refer to these character prototypes by name. So at the top of the matrix, we have three characters that are advocates: Mark, James, and Samir. Mark is the expert. He's the one who's been working on this for a long time. He may be in HR. He's already comfortable speaking to other men about, you can't address women in this way, or you need to hire more women like that. Or he speaks up freely in front of groups of men on behalf of women. James is the next level down. He's usually a very visible person in the organization. He leads by example. He's usually a really great manager who has probably built teams of 50-50 when it comes to gender, obviously included minorities and such as well. And he will address both men and women when he's speaking about these topics. He's super comfortable. Samir is the next level, and he's also an advocate. He's a sponsor. So rather than supporting many women by changing the culture in the organization, like James above him, he actually supports one woman at a time. So he will sponsor a woman at a time. He will make her visible. He will provide introductions and things like that. Then below these three advocates, we have the allies. And there's three allies. I want to say just the main difference between the people who are advocates and the people who are allies is that the advocates, they have full focus on everybody they're helping. So if you're part of the advocates, you're constantly turning your focus away from yourself and you're looking at me and asking, how can I help you? When it comes to the allies, they're also doing things to support women, but they may not even be aware of what they're doing. So we have at the top, we have Memo, who's the mentor. And so as a mentor, he may passively sit and wait for a woman to reach out to him and say, hey, I know you have expertise in this area. Could you help me along with that? I would like to learn, and it's not a the personal mentorship relationship. It could be very factual. It could be very based on tasks or ideas or the actual job or trying to cope with a manager or something like that. The next ally, the one in the middle of the three, is Al, and he's a happy-go-lucky ally. He says, yes, I want to support women. Yes, I want to help. I'm not quite sure how. So for him, the motivator might be, let me show you the way. Let me tell you what you can actually do. The third one of our allies is Cree, and he is, think of the guy who, when you start talking about this, so you and I are having a conversation here. Maybe he started listening, but he's kind of squirming a little bit, and he kind of wants to stop.
It's not my job, guy.
He wants to, exactly. So he's kind of like, maybe I should leave this podcast, or maybe I should listen, because what if I learn something? And he will typically be supporting women at home. He might support his wife, or he's supporting his daughters to get into college, or whatever it is. And so the idea there is for him to become aware of what he's already doing, which is great, and then bring that into the workplace. And then the bottom character on the matrix is Richard. And Richard is, I call him the chauvinist, but with a little bit of a sense of humor. There's no judgment. There's no criticism. There's no shame. There's no blame. I have no right to judge this guy. In my opinion, he's completely unaware, and he doesn't know why he should care about this topic at all. And so with him, we start talking about the talent shortage. And we're saying, well, you're climbing in your career, you're building teams. How on earth do you think you are going to be hiring the only guys who are left to do this job when there's so many women who have the potential to do it in 5 years, in 10 years from now? And you need to start broadening your views, dude, and open your eyes and say, maybe I should hire somebody who I'm not really used to hiring. And so with him, we need to respect the fact that he's starting from the ground, but we can give him tips and ideas of little things he can do so that he grows with the task and becomes more comfortable. And that is what this is all about. Just making them comfortable, supporting us without hesitation.
That is such an amazing brief of how this could work. And yeah, you've clearly identified the kind of people that we see in our ecosystem. And of course, there are people who really don't want to be there too. But Eva, the pandemic has changed. Fundamentally, it has transformed the American workplace. Not only the American workplace, the workplaces the world over. You have seen how it has. More people than ever are working from home. Meetings have moved from offices to screens. Travel has moved to the fantasy section of bookshops. Seriously, and employees are quitting their jobs by the droves, especially here in America. You know, we call it the great resignation, right? So the job vacancies are pushed to a record high, but the companies are innovating. The companies are innovating wherever they feel that there's a gap because the workers are not there. The staff is gone. There's no skilled person to do the job. They are automating. They're using more robots. They're using more machines. They're using more technology. So when this is happening, if women do not come up and they reskill themselves really quick, they're never going to be able to make it back into the workforce. How are we ever going to work with this kind of a situation, given diversity and inclusion has become something in the background right now? And you know, if you listen to all the companies around them, they're more concerned about expanding benefit plans, providing workers with flexible hours, emergency sick leaves, mental health services. All of these things have become more important. And diversity and inclusion has taken a backseat because what are women doing again? They're doing a lot of free job, sitting at home and taking care of the kids, sitting at home and leaving their jobs to do other stuff so that somebody can put the food on the table. So
Yes.
how do we work in this situation? How does your model work here?
I think it's a combination, though. I think that the two topics are very closely intertwined. So, you know, a lot of men that I talk to are like, well, this problem, you know, with diversity and inclusion and equality in the workplace between the genders, it's already resolved. What are we harping about? Like, why are we talking about it over and over and over? Well, you and I know, and the statistics show that we are nowhere close to equality.
In fact, we've gone backward in so many
Exactly.
ways.
We've gone backwards, and the pandemic has made us step backwards. The percentages are going down a couple of points because so many women have been forced to leave their jobs and stay at home with their children. Now, I do think that it's a combination, that it's intertwined with the benefits, though, because if there is focus on benefits, you will attract the right kind of people. And I think that flexible hours does suit women. If you have it in combination with a man and a woman, you know, or husband and wife, or same gender couple or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But if both people have a little bit of flexibility in their work, in the time that they spend working, it's going to help them a lot with the childcare. It's going to help them a lot with pickup and drop-offs and things like that. So it is important. I saw today that Deloitte's CEO has finally announced the same amount of parental leave for either the father or the co-parent of the mother. So they each now get 24 weeks, which is really phenomenal and definitely about time.
I think companies need to step up because US is the only nation that does not mandate paid family leave. And this is
if we're a little bit behind.
Situation. Paternity leave is provided in 105 economies for a median on only 5 days, but there are 184 countries that provide an average leave of 98 days for new moms. And America does not have any mandate around all of this.
Yeah.
So we know it's on President Biden's agenda, but we still haven't come there.
Yeah. No, so to answer or address the question, like in the work that I'm doing, it's all about individual responsibility. So rather than assuming that somebody else is doing this job for me, rather than assuming that HR is going to come in and solve all these problems, my challenge to men in this particular case in the workplace and people with power is that they take their responsibility. In an ideal world, I would like to see that the whole, side initiative, kind of the silo of HR initiatives are being moved into the line manager roles, that the budgets for anything like this is taken out of the line manager roles, that even if you're running a team of 2 or 3 people, that you say, hey, let's have this discussion in our group. What do we want our group to be like? What are the values in this group? Who do we want to hire? Who do we need to add to the team? Who's different than we are, so we don't hire another person who's nodding their head, somebody who questions how we're doing things. So it doesn't matter if we're working from home, online, virtually, or in the office, it's the same challenge. It's just that I'm really asking managers and peers to take their responsibility for the people who are around you. So if you happen to be just a peer on a team, you're an individual contributor, check in with somebody. If you're feeling that one of your coworkers is not like in a great mood, or they're not in a great place, and they're talking about taking a leave of absence or whatever it is, give them a call, talk to them, ask them what's going on. And that is normal, more normal between women and women and men and men. And so now we just need to make it comfortable for men to step out of that little comfort zone and check in on a woman without being judged for doing so. And how can we do that if the company culture is already kind of like infected? It's not good, it's not healthy, right? Well, what do we do then? Well, then we call HR and we say, hey, can you please put a program in place for this? We can call it a buddy program. We don't have to call it a mentorship program, but I want to make it official that I'm going to be checking in on this woman who's on my team outside of our official calling hours, and say, hey, do you want to talk at like 5:05 today for 5 or 10 minutes? I just want to check how you're doing as a friend, as a peer, as a coworker. And that whole thing of moving responsibility is so important. And it's even more important now because there's so many people who are sitting in silence at home doing their jobs, and they're completely isolated. And if this hybrid work environment is going to continue, we need to really take care of our
mental health,
our work friends, right?
Absolutely. And it's more than just a workplace issue. It is a mental health issue as well. How your environment has deep impact on how you're thinking and how productive you are in the ultimate game. My question to you, Eva, is during your interviews with all these 60 men from Silicon Valley, was there an underlying theme of what they felt was the most difficult thing for them to do to approach women? Did they wanted to see grow, or they wanted to see succeed? What was the biggest hurdle in doing that?
There wasn't one hurdle that was more than another, because the hurdles were different at different stages. So remember how we talked about the 3 allies? With them, one of the big hurdles was their unawareness of the fact that they were already helping somebody. So for me, it was a question of digging a little bit and understanding what they were doing, what kind of conversations were they having right now? Were they already helping a woman on their team, or somebody at home, or maybe there was a group of them supporting a woman. So once they became aware of it, they were like, oh, wow, I'm already doing that. And that awareness of, wow, I'm already doing it, I could do more of that. That is a great one. When you climb higher up on the matrix and you get to the advocates, they were fully aware of what they were doing, if they were supporting one woman at a time, or if they were supporting the whole culture of the company. And I think the hurdle of the higher up you get, and so let's just say that these 7 levels are not related to how high you are on the hierarchy of work at all. So it's not like if you're a James at the very top of the matrix, you're definitely a manager. You could just as well be a peer. But so for the ones who are higher up on the matrix, but lower in the organization, if they're just individual contributors, is that the hurdle there is that their work is not being made visible as much. But even for those who were changing organizations and having a 50-50 team, for example, there I had to remind them to make their work visible, talk about it with other men, discuss why it's so great for your organization, show the financial results of how they have improved, show the increase in productivity, show how you're coming up with new ideas and innovations because you have a mixed team. You need to start talking about these things. So the hurdles were very different. There is, like I spoke about earlier, there's a high level of fear, and that is not across the board. It's definitely very prevalent in the four lower categories, but even among the higher ones, there is a level of fear of making a mistake, saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing. And so that is why the work that I've developed is based on, okay, you identify with one of the character prototypes. Once you've done that, you can start practicing what the character above yours is already doing. Based on examples from the interviews, I'm not going to tell you what to do. And by practicing over and over and over, there's a whole new level of confidence that comes with that, and a comfort level. And then when you've done all of that, you've mastered it, then you climb to the next level.
Well, it's funny that you say there's this fear of doing the wrong thing, and that's a big overbearing factor on not only within the tech community, but also the growth of women within the tech community gets hampered. And we spoke about it, a few years ago when we were talking about, all right, these men are not okay. They have been shamefully indulging in practices that are not okay as far as women are concerned. However, is the right thing for the women to go to media and expose them? How's that going to really help the situation? If we cognitively looked at the brains of these men and how they're thinking, in their mind, they don't know the difference. A lot of them did not know what they were doing was stepping outside the boundaries because of that entire process of evolution over years where this was okay a few years ago. Right. And we spoke deeply about the cure is in cognitively understanding how men think and how to communicate to them that this is where they're crossing the line. So did you feel that was a really big hurdle for them to start working with women closely in growing women around them and including women into their teams?
Well, I think that, if they are working in a corporate culture where this is accepted, where it's accepted to support women and minorities, and it's part of what everybody does, then it's not a big hurdle, but otherwise it can be. Now, the other thing, you reminded me when we had this conversation back many years ago, and the fear was kind of building and building and building. It was getting really bad. And I was doing a presentation about the reaction of women on the Me Too movement, because everybody has, depending on, women are, of course, different as men, right? So our interpretation or emotions that follow any kind of assault or sexual harassment or even a comment, but primarily I want to say exclusion. Like being excluded can be so painful. And with a virtual world, there's a lot of advantages from women. There's not as much physical harassment in the tech workplace anymore because we are actually doing things on Zoom or other platforms, or we are. And the other thing I was hearing was a woman who was saying, well, it's so fascinating. I'm really short, but it's so great when nobody knows that anymore. I never have to look up at anybody anymore when I'm at work. But I think when I presented the material about women's, different levels, because it's always the perception. Like for me to be not included in a group discussion may feel very different than somebody who was bullied in school, who will take it very seriously, and it will be absolutely awful sentiment for that person.
And also there is this element of culture where, you expect to be included and where you're fighting to be included are totally two different cultures that you come from. Cultures where women are still not considered as human beings have just another way of processing things that happen to them versus women who are emancipated enough to fight for their rights. So very different cultural perspectives, the same language, the same action can be interpreted differently by different women.
Exactly. And that's why I'm thinking that like the lowest common denominator, that's where we need to start. So just because I tend to have really, thick skin and worked in tech for 20 years and nothing hardly ever faced me, and I was okay with most of the comments and I couldn't care less, that does not mean that I'm the average person. So you have to go to sort of the lowest common denominator among women, and that's where you need to start. Those are the kinds of reactions that you need to talk about. And one of the things that taught me this, so many years ago, I had kids in daycare, and in the winter, they wouldn't take the kids outside. And I grew up in a very cold country, and the saying there is there's no bad weather, only bad clothing. So you get dressed and you go outside no matter what the weather is, because fresh air is like the most important thing. And so here I am sitting in, Cambridge, Massachusetts with my kids in daycare, and they wouldn't take them outside if it was cold. And I was crazy. And so I put together all this information about how important it is for children to be outside and to open out and air out the rooms and things like that. What I didn't think about was that more than 50% of the people who had children in that daycare, they came from very warm countries, and they thought it was brutally cold and they would never go outside. And so I learned that we didn't have a lot of discussions around it, but I started to become more aware of my surroundings. Their background, their culture, their framework was completely different than mine.
The way they were processing that entire winter is different. The way they want their kids to grow up is different. They have a different rule book altogether. And it's same with women.
Exactly. And so that's a total parallel to the workplace. And that is why opening up these doors now and saying, here, you can read about this. We can give the guys names as a joke or seriously, but I'm giving you a language so that you can comfortably talk about this without any man having to feel threatened. And by introducing this material, you can basically say, hey, I'm new at this. I am interested in learning. I don't know where to begin. Please forgive my mistakes and remind me when I'm making mistakes. And that is what we all need to get better at, women and men.
And men. Yeah, I completely agree with you over there. And men and even women to a large extent that even take, if you say the word feminism, that has become the world's largest negative word ever made. Feminism is not about women getting better than men. It's about women getting the same opportunities that men have had for years. But yes, of course, it's gone to a little extreme, and it has a lot of negative connotation for a lot of men, and it kind of makes people shut off completely. And we spoke about it earlier as well. However, I think this is a great start, Eva. You have written this book, which can be a game changer for the industry, how men can literally start working with women, redefine their roles with women, and how men can really step up and become allies and advocates and bring women to the opportunities that they've had for so many years themselves. So thank you so much for being here with me on this podcast, Eva, and this is so wonderful. Guys, her book is called Women in Tech, a book for guys, and it is available online. Search for it. Her name is Eva Helen, and she is the CEO of EQ Inspiration. And thank you so much for taking out the time to talk to me, Eva.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.